So by 2034, I think not only will people realize how AI can add value, but they're already benefiting from that value, basically. So over the next 10 years, I think, the early adopters, the fast followers, the mainstream adopters, and the laggards would have started to use AI across, whether it's a company, whether it's an end user, whether it's university, and we'll all benefit from it. And the benefit could be not just reduction in cost or whatever, but things getting done faster, basically. The speed of business is where I think the value is going to come from.
And welcome back to another episode of the 100 Year Podcast. My name is Adario Strange, and this week we have with us the CEO and founder of Kore.ai, Raj Koneru. How are you, Raj?
Hi, Adario. I'm good. Thank you. How
So
are you?
where are you actually based?
I'm right now in New York City, but I'm based in Orlando, Florida. So,
Oh man, we've got to actually like cross paths, man. We're in the same area. I'm in Manhattan. You guys crossed a big milestone this year. My understanding is you founded the company in 2014 after founding a few other startups. But this January, you guys landed, was it 150 million in new funding? Do I have that right?
that's right. Yeah, it was a Series D, and we raised about 150 million in order to
And
catch the growth of the company.
and one of the investors, if I'm not incorrect, is Nvidia. Is that right? So that's huge. An AI startup, and one of the investors is Nvidia, which is, I think, quite notable and should actually be even bigger news now that I think Nvidia recently crossed the most valuable tech company on the planet status via its stock price, I think maybe a week ago. So for people who don't know your background, like tell us a little bit about you. I mean, you have like a pretty old, I mean, you're a veteran. You're not new to this. This isn't like you didn't just. I mean, people. A lot of people like I'm new to you, and a lot of people are new to you. But you've been doing tech for quite some time. Like, give us a sense of your background.
Yeah, I mean, I studied management and engineering in college and started building companies about 34 years ago. So built a couple of companies in the 90s, took them public. They eventually got sold. Then my last company that I built was a enterprise mobile platform company,
Is that
um,
Coney?
Kore, yeah, which was a leader in its space. So that company continued to grow and got sold about 4 or 5 years ago. This company I started in 2014, so it's just over 10 years old, and this is focused on AI, enterprise AI to be specific, to enable enterprises to take advantage of AI for different use cases, basically across the organization. So we started in conversational AI in the beginning, and for the most of our existence, the focus was on conversational AI. And since the large language models came out last year, we incorporated them into our existing platform for conversational AI, but we also launched a new platform called Gale, which is a Gen AI platform to enable enterprises to fine tune their own models and to build AI agents. And we also launched a search platform to ingest large quantity of documents, unstructured content, if you will, and be able to produce answers automatically from those documents. So both those platforms are Gen AI based, and we've incorporated, like I said, the large language models into our conversational AI platform. So we're covering the full gamut of all types of use cases that an enterprise wants to use AI for, whether it's customer service, employee experience, search experience, applications as we know them, which are primarily UI based, are also changing, with now those applications getting co-pilots, which are conversational in nature. So there's a lot of demand brewing to take advantage of AI, and we provide the platforms to those enterprises to enable them to do so.
Awesome. And I want to unpack a little bit more about Core AI, but just give me a sense, like you just mentioned, you guys are 10 years old. And for much of the business community, you have companies pivoting to AI, you have a lot of new startups. 10 years ago is pretty prescient. That's like, I mean, way ahead of the game. Can you just give me a sense, like, what did you see 10 years ago that gave you a sense that this was the direction, this was the future?
Well, 10 years ago, I don't think there was as much discussion about AI specifically, but there was an inkling that I had that the concept of consuming applications and data is going to shift from a UI based interface to a non UI based natural language interface. So, whether you look at ChatGPT or Siri or Amazon Alexa or Google Assistant, those were some of the early indicators of, hey, natural language based engagement with data and applications is the future. So that is how we got started. Now, when you want to execute with natural language, you need to use AI. And we use the available models at different points in time over over the last 10 years to be able to get better and better at fundamentally understanding what a user is saying, understanding the intent, understanding what exactly they want to get done, and then be able to take the action. But now with the large language models, obviously, things have gone beyond just understanding and natural language processing. There's also the aspect of generating responses and content or summarizing information or whatever the case may be. Now, since last year, now we have even better models like large language models, which not only improve the ability to understand what the user is saying, but also can generate responses. So it is taken it to a different level now in terms of being able to create these conversational applications. There are non-conversational applications as well, which are more process oriented, like it can go and consume some content and generate new content. It can go consume some content and summarize content, basically. And those are increasingly the newer use cases that are coming to bear. So the vision that I had or my team had was that natural language computing is the future as opposed to traditional UI based applications, and that led to us investing in AI, and that led to us building a platform which enables enterprises to build those natural language based applications. And now with the new platforms that we've released like Gale and Search AI, now you can do non conversational use cases as well.
Just to be clear, do you actually have search.ai? Is that one of your
No,
domains?
is our product name. We don't have
Okay. I
domain
was
name.
I was like, that might have been one of the best URLs ever. Okay. So I'm curious, like, first of all, are you guys cloud based primarily in terms of like how you deploy your product to your
Yeah, we're
customers?
cloud agnostic. We run on multiple clouds, AWS, Google, Azure, but we also spin up private clouds for some of our large customers, and some of our customers want to run on-prem. So we deploy our platform on-prem as well. Many of the customers who wanted on-prem have now moved to the cloud. Others are on their way to move to the cloud. So we can deploy anywhere.
So when I think about what you guys are doing, it sounds very powerful, but the first thing I think of is, okay, what about the existing big players, the Googles, the OpenAIs, the Microsoft? Microsoft is now spinning up its own brand of AI service. Like, what's the differentiator between what you guys are doing and what some of the big, you know, the big
Yeah,
tech?
we take a platform approach as opposed to many of these other players take an API or a service approach, basically. So if you're a customer, you're an enterprise, if you use the components that are provided by any of those players you mentioned, You'll have to stitch it all together yourself, basically, to achieve a use case. Whereas if they use our platform, we make it model agnostic, cloud agnostic, data agnostic. You can pick and choose whichever model. You can integrate whichever data. You can run on any cloud. But we give you the tools and the capabilities for you to do an end-to-end development of a use case, all the way from design to developing it, training it, testing it, deploying it, managing it, measuring the performance end to end. So both the choice that you have with us as opposed to getting stuck with whatever Google provides, only their models, or OpenAI only provides their models, or Microsoft only provides theirs. You have choice, but you also have the speed to be able to deploy an enterprise grade application. And we take care of the security. We're SOC 2 certified. We are HIPAA compliant. We take care of the scalability. We have some of the largest deployments in the world running on our platform right now in production, basically. So if you if you're an enterprise and you have a plethora of use cases that you want to deploy, you're looking for a platform. You're not looking just for a API or a service and then requiring a large number of coders to build using that service. Our platforms, all three platforms, are completely codeless. These are no code platforms. So somebody like you and me, can sit here and develop a chatbot or a voice bot without writing a single line of code.
So, without necessarily getting into prices, like customization is expensive and in some cases difficult. When we're talking about these larger companies, the big, the more well-known players, their off-the-shelf solutions is, I think, in many cases what makes them attractive. So is that kind of, in addition to just not only that being the service you provide, customization, tailoring it to each client, but does that make what you do even more expensive, or is that kind of baked into your costs? Like, how does that work in terms of like cost outlay for the client?
Well, there are two scenarios, right? A customer can choose our platform and then use a partner or use their own people to build their use case. Let's say a customer wants to build a chat bot for customer service or voice bot for customer service, and it's very unique and they want to build it on their own. Again, it's a no code platform, so uh, you can build these in a couple of weeks or a couple of months as opposed to a couple of years, essentially. If we also provide pre-built solutions for specific vertical and horizontal use cases, like we have a product called Bank Assist for banking, Retail Assist, Health Assist, IT Assist for IT support, HR Assist for HR support. So those come with pre-built functionality that you can configure for your own specific needs. And those are built on our platform. So if you want to customize it, take something off the shelf like what we provide, and then customize it. It's easy to do because it's a pre-built solution on our platform, essentially. So you don't have to start from scratch. We can get you 80% of the way there with the pre-built solution, and the remaining 20%, you do it on your own. We don't bake in the implementation cost into our, into our fee. That's over and above, what we charge for our platforms.
So let's talk about security. My understanding, and if I'm incorrect, please correct me. My understanding is that you can train a model specific to a particular company. And let's say that company is dealing with high end, let's just take a bank, security, where security is like even more important, financial records, transactions. Um, I mean, how are you approaching that? Like, what does it take to get some large company, mid-sized company that has no engagement with AI, has used the cloud to some degree, but they don't maybe understand large language models and training and inference. Like, how do you explain to them how the security works in terms of preventing data leakage, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so it's simple. First of all, we're a multi-tenant platform. So each tenant, meaning each customer, has their own tenant, and nobody has access to their applications or their data, including us, basically. So all of the data is encrypted at rest and in transport. The, the encryption keys are only available to them. and they can recycle those encryption keys on a periodic basis, which is a best practice. That's one. Two, they can mask PII data, personal info identification data, and before they store the data, essentially in their tenant. So, and they have access to those unmasking keys, and nobody else does, essentially. So, from a security standpoint, whether you're a small bank or a large bank or a small company or a large company, it's the same. The data that you use to train the model within our platform is only in your tenant, basically. So we don't have access to it. We can't use that data to train our other models or any model, basically. So the application and the data is completely secured through encryption and PII masking, as well as it is tenant specific. So what you create, what data you use to train, what data you access from your backend systems are completely sandboxed, essentially. That therefore, nobody else gets access to it.
So I don't necessarily, when I bring up a particular company, I'm not necessarily asking you to comment on that company, but I am using them as a case example. And this is one of those examples. So staying on the topic of security, we actually had a guest on many episodes ago where they launched a product that essentially, the idea was to capture your entire, I guess, computer usage and allow you to basically kind of have like a local AI agent help you as your own assistant. And the idea was that it wouldn't send things to the cloud, it would operate locally. Um, and I think some people were a little creeped out by that, despite their kind of, assurances about security. And that was, some months ago.
Now, the key part to getting this right is the privacy part, and that's your right to bring that up. And so everything you see saying here, all of that is stored locally. All of the recordings are stored locally. We don't have access to them as the creators of Rewind. Your employer doesn't have access to them as the owner of your laptop. Only you have access to the actual recordings. To the extent that any of that ever leaves your machine, the only parts that ever get used for GPT-4 to answer those kinds of questions are the exact moments of your past, the small, 0.001% of those recordings that are relevant to that question. None of that is used to train GPT-4. None of that, and it's only stored for 30 days for just fraud and malicious purposes. Then it's deleted. So it's not that you should have any fear that your data is being used to make the AI smarter. Quite the opposite. None of it is being used to make the AI smarter. We don't have access to it. GPT-4, to the extent it has access to it, is only using it. And it doesn't train on it at all. It removes it after 30 days.
Just recently, we had Microsoft announce that they were going to do or unveil a product called Recall.
With Recall, we're going to leverage the power of AI and the new system performance to make it possible to access virtually anything you have ever seen on your PC. It's going to be, honestly, as if you have photographic memory.
Which pretty much did exactly the same thing. And in very short order, they announced kind of like a pullback. Because many people seem to be concerned about, their privacy. I don't want necessarily, even if it's an AI agent that I can trust, I don't want something watching my, kind of operations throughout the day. How did you see that as that played out, just from your vantage point, from a security AI meets security standpoint? Like, did you have any thoughts about like how that all played out?
Well, I mean, there are different use cases, right? The use case you're mentioning is running on your laptop or desktop and watching what you're doing and collecting that information and helping you. No matter what the use case is, whether it's that use case or it's a chatbot or a voice bot, fundamentally the question is the data that is being provided either by the creator of the application or the user of the application, where does it reside and who has access to it? So the data does reside on the cloud with us, but in your tenant, it's like, I have this apartment building and I've given you this, and only you have the keys to go into that apartment and access what's in there, like the data that you store in there, the things that you do in there. And as the landlord, even I don't have access to it, basically. So therefore, by using encryption, PII masking, tenant level security, we keep that only accessible by you. Whether it's the use case of collecting data on a laptop or it's chatbot that you put out on your website to address customers' questions or allow them to take actions. All those are just applications which are either using data you provided it or collecting data from the customer, or the end user, but all that is stored in a way by which nobody can access it. So we go through extensive, security reviews by some of the largest banks, some of the largest insurance companies, healthcare companies, and it's a constant thing, right? I mean, there's a large questionnaire. Some of them also do penetration testing on our platform. The SOC 2 audit that we go through every year, make sure that like our platform, as a standard is following standards, basically that will not allow any of that data leakage to happen. Now, what Microsoft announced with Recall may be something a little different from what we're doing here, basically. So even when we use an external model, we don't always use external models. We're reducing the use of external models. We've created our own set of models, smaller language models, which are hosted by us, basically, again, in each tenant, basically. But if we do use an external model, we only use them in a way by which that data that goes to the external model is again secured only for that tenant, basically. And even the model company cannot use that data to train their own models, essentially. So
Yeah, I want to speak to kind of the cultural aspect though, because your client, the people you deal with are primarily enterprise. And for those who aren't aware, enterprise basically just translates into business customers, largely. With Microsoft, they had kind of, I think, what they encountered was a culture problem, meaning just the general public, not necessarily, C-suite execs who understand, the shifting tides of business and, how operations and innovation works. There was like a great kind of cultural, I think, reaction to the idea of what they were trying to do with. And by the way, the company was that we had on earlier that did something similar. Well, actually, they did it first. Was called Rewind, and then Dan Soroker is the founder, and then Recall is the Microsoft product. How do you address the cultural issue? Again, aside from, let's say, enterprise businesses and executives, like, here in New York, you see kind of like things change so rapidly. I'm just wondering, like, how does a company like Microsoft or anyone engaging the normal consumer address that kind of cultural disconnect?
Well, first off, we are not a consumer-facing company, right? Like you said, we are an enterprise-facing company. But all of our enterprise customers, most of them are consumer-facing companies. So when a large bank uses our platform, they're putting out experiences on our platform towards their consumers. So they take the rigor to make sure that that experience that they put out to the consumer is valuable to the consumer. And there are various metrics that they measure. So on the hard metrics, are we successfully, achieving what the consumer wants? Basically, is the bot, helping the consumer to apply for a loan, get his bank balances, look up his transactions, so that the consumer doesn't have to talk to a human agent. That's the hard metric. And then there's the soft metric, which is, customer satisfaction, NPS scores, which they measure again. If X number of consumers engaged with this bot, what was their rating, basically, of the performance of the bot. The thing with the bot is it's a machine at the end of the day. So it's always available, as opposed to sitting on hold, waiting for a human agent, and then having to be transferred from one human agent to another, and then repeat your information. So all those irritations will go away with the bot. But then there's the question of, does the bot understand what the hell I'm saying? Basically. So that's a critical element. And that's where the natural language processing with AI models comes into play. So those metrics give an indication to the enterprise customers saying this is valuable. Now, the end user may be a consumer, or it could be an employee of the company, or it could be a partner of the company. Different use cases have different end users, and that's how they measure it, essentially. So, if you talk about Microsoft, I mean, they're both a consumer-facing company as well as an enterprise-facing company. So when they deal with enterprises, much like we do, basically they have to provide the tools and the capabilities for the enterprise to then put out the right experience to the consumer and satisfy the consumer. Basically, when they put out something directly to the consumer, essentially, then they have to take care of that consumer experience. So the onus, the responsibility, and the onus of that experience definition is on the enterprise, basically, to satisfy their end users. We are like sort of the picks and shovels, basically, of this industry, where we provide them the tools and the picks and the shovels to enable them to create that experience in a secure way, in a scalable way, by using the latest models, by running this on the cloud, basically to enable them to do that faster, better, and cheaper.
That's a great way of framing it. But nevertheless, I still want to kind of, if you are advising either one of your clients or just a startup in general who is looking to deploy AI, let's say I'm someone who, let's say I'm engaging a bank. Let's say it's a small, mid-sized regional bank, and I'm frustrated by the AI chatbot that it's using to handle whatever my interactions with the bank. Um, this has been happening, this kind of interaction has been happening for large scale banks, and it's just getting more widespread. How do we design an AI chatbot customer service um, entity, I guess, that doesn't frustrate the human? That picks up the nuance. Like, we're not at superintelligence yet. Like, how do we design something that allows the human on the other end who's frustrated to not immediately think I'm just dealing with an automated responder?
Yeah, so it depends on what technology you used to build that bot. So does the bot measure sentiment? Basically, so in our platform, every word you speak to the bot is measuring your sentiment. And if your sentiment is going down, then the creator of the bot would tell the bot to take some actions, like transfer it to a human agent, apologize, be empathetic, that sort of thing. But more importantly than that is, okay, in the first place, by looking at historical data, that small bank should be able to tell, hey, our consumers are calling for these top 10 things, basically. And 80% of our volume, people call to get their balances. Maybe they want to apply for a loan. Maybe they want to dispute a charge, whatever it is, basically. And you can design the bot in such a way to make sure those 10 things work really well, basically. And you can test it. What if the consumer says it this way or that way or this way or that way? And with the large language models, with the enhanced natural language understanding, with the context management that we do in our platform, we can make it a very human-like experience, basically. And we can make it an experience that fulfills a task, essentially. So my advice to them is, crawl, walk, and run. The crawl is look at your top use cases, build the bot, train it appropriately, test it appropriately, and then put it out. And you will learn what's working, what's not working. We provide all the tools in our platform to enable them to see, hey, these things are working really well, but those things are not. Let's go and tinker with those things and make them better, and then see how consumers react. So it's not once and done. This thing is a living being that you need to care for, to improve it. Well, after like a month maybe, or 2 months or 3 months, you get it to a point where it's awesome. For those 10 use cases, it's like 99% of the time consumers are happy, they're getting their job done, and things are going well. And then you walk, you say, okay, let's pick the next 10 and the next 10, and then you go from there. So, trying to boil the ocean is the wrong strategy, basically. Pick your battle, win it, then pick the next one and the next one, and care for it like you would care for a human agent, where you need to constantly train him. Instead of having to train hundreds of agents or thousands of agents, you're training a machine to get better and better at, understanding what the consumer is saying and taking care of his requirement.
That leads perfectly into my next question. So I wanted to touch on superintelligence, artificial superintelligence. So recently, Ilya Sutskever, formerly of OpenAI, left the company, and prior to his departure, it was a big story. We covered it. Everyone knows that Sam Altman was momentarily deposed, like kind of taken down from his seat as CEO, and Ilya remained on the board and uh, seemingly did not push back against the ouster or the attempted ouster of Sam Altman. Sam Altman came back, a new board was installed, and everything seemed to be fine for a while at least. But when all the hubbub happened, so many months ago, some of the concern or some of the chatter was that it was related to internal concerns around superintelligence and if the company was approaching it safely and if enough concern was being paid to that issue versus profit. Some believing that perhaps Sam might not be as concerned with the safety risks as much as people like Ilya. So Ilya left, and just about a week ago, announced a new company, a new startup called Safe Superintelligence. Not a lot of creativity there, right? Straight to the point. Um, and that their mission statement is that it is an artificial intelligence company squarely devoted to that mission. Like guardrails for how we reach AI superintelligence. So I just wanted to kind of get your perspective on this entire topic. It seems that I guess the research world is divided. We've had people on who think it's all silly, fear mongering, and that we don't have anything to worry about. AI is a tool. Then we have other people who believe that we are behind the eight ball. We're not paying enough attention to superintelligence as perhaps a looming concern or issue for humans uh, beyond just business and work, but just our existence on the planet. So just on a general, in a general sense, like what are your thoughts on superintelligence?
Well, it's very difficult to define what that is, but here's something to consider. Whatever model that's out there, whether it's a current day model or a model 5 years from now that's far more intelligent than what it is right now, is a request response system. You're going to send it some request and you're going to get a response. And if you can put guardrails in front, on the front side when you send the request in, to check what input you're sending in, and to put guardrails on the output, you can control, that model and the use of that model. So we have a guardrail framework in our platform. And whenever we send anything to any LLM, whether that LLM is hosted in our own platform or it's hosted externally, we enable those guardrails both at the input side and the output side. Now, there's this concept of autonomous bots, right? That is coming. It's not there yet, but it's coming. And that's sort of maybe more relevant to the superintelligence element, where the bots go do things without instruction, right? You give it an overall goal and it just goes and, talks to other bots and it just tries to achieve that goal without any controls, basically. Today, the use cases that enterprises are trying to put out to consumers, and even consumers using something like ChatGPT or Google Gemini or whatever, are all request response systems. So those are controlled inputs and controlled outputs. There has not been a scenario yet where they're just bots just go wild and control things. These are controlled environments. So I think the responsibility is less, in my opinion, on the model company. The model company ought to make those models, more intelligent, and they will become more intelligent over time. It is the user of that model who has to put the guardrails in place to make sure that the models are not doing autonomous work, they're being doing controlled work, basically. So platforms like ours enable the enterprises to safely use those models as opposed to letting the models just do whatever it does but on its own. Now the model companies may want the model to just be everything, right? It's not just the brain, but it's the arms and the legs and your heart and everything else, basically. But most enterprises think of it as a brain where I send some input and I get some output, essentially. So therefore, I'm not so concerned about it. I think people talk about government regulation and things like that. Basically, I don't think any of that is really going to ever work because what are you going to regulate? It's a moving target. Basically, things are changing every day. So the frameworks and the platforms like ours, which enable the creator of these bots and the people who deploy these bots have to use the guardrails to control that input and output and not just leave it to the bots themselves. And that's where I think the world is going to go. Now, what Ilya is going to do in his company, maybe it's a guardrail company, maybe it's a model company. We don't know. But the concept is the same. How do you control the model to not go haywire, essentially? And that is being done today in production with guardrails of the type that we provide. Like we have a toxicity guardrail, we have a bias guardrail, we have a guardrail on profanity. You can create your own guardrail on our framework, basically, and that's how you go about it.
Do you think we ever will achieve or encounter artificial superintelligence that is completely liberated from guardrails and free of any controls by the human hand?
Well, it depends on the humans, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the models are going to get more and more intelligent. The more data they're trained on, they're going to know more things. They're going to be able to generate more things, and they're going to be able to do more things. So let's say there's this super intelligent model, and it's achieved artificial general intelligence, which seems to be the holy grail of where the model companies want to go. Let's say we are there today, and this fantastic model exists. It's still on us as to how we're going to use that model. Basically, the model is not going to go take over the world. It's just a machine at the end of the day, basically. So it's how are we going to use that model for our use cases, basically. Now, if I choose to let the model make the decisions on all the decisions that need to be made for a particular use case, then yes, I'm in trouble because I'm not controlling anything. Basically, it may do something which could be harmful. But I am stupid enough to have done that, basically. So if I have a super intelligent computer or a model, basically, if I use it appropriately with the appropriate guardrails, it's going to make my use case much, much better, basically, versus, letting the model, think of it like it'll do things on its own and it'll do it really well, essentially. So I'm not so worried about, people saying that they're going to take over the world and they'll do things which could start wars or, start a famine. And, these are extreme, imaginations. In the practical world, I think the use of these models for specific use cases will enable these enterprises and businesses to control what the models can do.
So what you're saying makes a lot of sense if we're just solving for the business community and good operators, good actors. But we have open source AI, and particularly like in the realm of, let's say, generative AI art or generative AI films, we're seeing some of the open source models be used to create some things that are in some cases a little racy, a little distasteful in some cases. Um, so it seems to me logical that at some point someone will, in the open source space, will aggressively develop an AI model, that is something deliberately created to operate on its own and explore the world and maybe create chaos. I mean, and we've seen that, open source isn't really something that you can necessarily control so far. So, I mean, have you considered that? Is that something that you think is not worth worrying about?
Whether it's a commercial model or an open source model, I think we're saying the same thing. At the end of the day, um, I give you something, and it's up to you to use it appropriately, basically. You can't blame me for giving you something really good. It's up to you to use it appropriately. So, whether it's open source, and let's say somebody created a model that's distasteful, that's not secure, that's not safe, that creates havoc, kind of thing, and the model produces that kind of output, basically. The model itself is not going to go and do it, right, until you put it to use, basically. So it's onus on you to put the guardrails in place to not let the model go do those things at the end of the day.
Right, but I'm saying worst case scenario, a bad actor out there who's using open source tools to do exactly that. They're not beholden to the business community. They're not beholden to a particular government, or maybe they are, and that's why they're doing it. But I mean, is that not something you consider a real concern?
I mean, this is actually much simpler in my opinion, because if you're using a model, you're using a machine, and everything is recorded, basically. So if I'm a bad actor and I went and used this to do some harm, basically there's evidence that I did that, essentially. So the laws of the land in whichever country will apply to me. I mean, like, it's the same like insider trading, right? Basically, I mean, I can get some information about some company and go buy their stock or sell their stock and make money off it. But insider trading is unlawful, essentially. So the laws will still protect people from these bad actors. You can't stop a person from making a bomb, basically. But if they use the bomb, then of course the laws come into play, and whether it's terrorism or whether it's a crime or whatever, and you catch the guy and put him in jail or do whatever, essentially. So same thing here. The technology is just a tool. It's a means to an end. Basically, the humans are the ones that are going to use the model to achieve some end. And if they're doing it in such a way that they're breaking the law, basically, then like anything else, law enforcement will have to, come into play and correct that. You can't fault the technology, is my point. And you can't control it. It will continue to evolve. I mean, going back 50 years ago, or maybe 60 years ago, we didn't have the computer. We didn't have the internet, basically. We didn't have mobile devices. We didn't have wireless communications. So technology has improved our lives significantly over this period of time. Going back 25 or 30 years ago, when I grew up, there was no email, there was no internet, essentially. But now we can't live without it. Similarly, these models are going to make our lives better, but much like the internet, also had bad actors, basically. There will be bad actors who use these models, basically. So I think it's onus on law enforcement doing its job, basically, and making sure that people are not doing bad things with the models, but you can't stop the development of these models, whether it's open source or commercial in general.
So I just have a couple more questions, and I want to get off this this topic, but I just want to be clear because we often bring up the topic of science fiction on this podcast. So these scenarios where an AI entity or instantation essentially takes on its own independence, moves on into the world, let's say away from its creator, whoever, trained it, cobbled it together, moves on, begins to have its own thoughts about, well, this is what should happen with humanity or with this particular city. Right now, those are largely science fiction scenarios. So just if I'm clear, you're saying you believe a lot of these science fiction scenarios are just that, science fiction, and not rooted in probable reality.
Yeah, I completely believe that. I think at the end of the day, the humans are going to control how these things are used. These things are not, in my opinion, anytime soon, or probably ever, just going to autonomously go and do things in general. So if I'm the creator of something that's doing harm, whether I intended or not, I'm responsible, basically. And law has to apply to me, essentially. And then you try to, stop that machine from continuing to do harm at the end of the day. So I don't think those scenarios like these models and bots will take over cities and create havoc. And I don't believe in all that, because at the end of the day, the humans are the ones that are actually putting these models to work.
Got it. And I hope you're right. I really, really, myself, and I think a lot of other people very much hope you're right. Um, just a couple more questions. Back to the idea of AI agents, I guess, augmenting and in some cases replacing work. Um, there have been a few studies that have come out. One came out in 2003, 2023, that talked about something on the order of 4,000 jobs that may have been impacted by AI kind of coming to prominence. But in general, I think there was like a recent in February, Challenger, Gray, and Christmas, if I have that right, came out with a report that said something like only 300, from what they could tell, something only like 300 some odd jobs had been lost due to AI. So right now, we still seem to be in a state where AI is augmenting and providing, I guess, a benefit largely for humans in the white collar workspace. But what do you say to people who look toward the future in terms of job displacement because of AI, and particularly like what AI agents do with regard to customer service, um, just various interactions, banking, law. Like, how do you speak to the concerns of people who are worried? Okay, well then, if we lose all these white collar jobs, what do we do? What do humans do?
Well, I mean, look, at the end of the day, whether it's AI or any other technology that has come so far, basically achieves to make things simpler and easier for humans and businesses. Okay, so if I'm in a job today that AI can automate, basically, then I need to reskill myself to a job where you need a human to operate something, basically. So yes, AI will automate. That's one of its primary goals, right? That's the primary goal of businesses, to automate as much as they can and increase the speed of business, increase profits, increase value of the company. That's never going to change, and nobody can stop that. The humans who are getting displaced, in those jobs where AI will immediately have an impact, will have to reskill into a different role, that the company needs people to do, essentially. And I think companies, I know for a fact that many of our customers are aware of this and are providing opportunities for those people who want to reskill and move into a different area, basically, to be able to go down that new path. So this is going to evolve. It's unstoppable. Nobody can stop it. People have to realize that, well, it's a new world. I need to have different skills, to do a different job and still earn a good wage and be able to support my family. And that's been happening for decades and decades, and it'll continue with AI or without AI going forward.
Is this a message that the university system needs to hear? And let me just maybe kind of outline it a bit. If you speak to a high school student, let's say, whatever, 11th, 12th grade, and you ask them about AI, they're probably already using AI in some form, whether it's on social media or even to, you know, help with homework, maybe cheat sometimes. Uh, so they're already, children adopt to innovation very rapidly, but the academic institutions are largely controlled by the old school, the old guard. um, and so this entire university system kind of works in tandem with, at least in America, with the business community to kind of groom these people before they get into the workforce. But if AI is rapidly disrupting entire industries, like it, right now, I'm not getting a sense that the academic community is fully engaged with AI and understands the disruption happening and understands the new tools. And as you said, kind of like the reskilling needed to attack what's happening. Like, do you think some sort of initiative needs to happen on the at the university level to kind of never mind the students, because I think the students understand from a cultural level what's happening, but the academic community, like, do they need some sort of like push?
No, they don't. I think they all realize it. I've talked to many universities, recently, and they're all creating new courses and new programs and new degrees, to teach AI or enable the use of AI, in different, areas, in engineering areas and non-engineering areas, liberal arts, wherever. So the courses will change and the degrees will change, some of them faster than others. But this is a transition. I think they all know where it's going. They're not like, they're not sitting under a rock somewhere, basically. So the transition will take time. It's not going to happen overnight. Basically, maybe over the course of this decade, maybe next decade as well, basically. But everybody is conscious of this and everybody is working on it, whether it's an enterprise or an university, basically. And this is going back to 1995, let's say, when the dawn of the internet was starting to happen. That disrupted a lot of industries. The biggest, company, one of the largest companies in the world, Amazon, disrupted a lot of, retail industry, essentially. So similarly, I think now, 25 years later or 30 years later, basically we've all adapted to how things work on the internet, how things work on mobile. Similarly, whether it's courses in universities or enterprises or whatever, they will adapt over a period of time.
Um, that's a great analogy about with the internet. But I would note that it did seem like, because I remember those days, it seemed like the universities did take a minute, at least. And I'm excluding like MITs and the Harvards and the Stanfords because they're usually on the cutting edge of technology. The larger academic community did seem like they took a bit to kind of catch up with the internet. So I guess that's the source of my concern. But speaking about time, um, yeah, I think the first article I ever wrote about AI loosely was 2013, and I didn't really start getting my hands dirty, in earnest with the topic till about 2022, really. And since 2022, things have changed dramatically on so many fronts. I have never, and I've seen, and I used to say this on my own, but I've heard, people far more experienced and deeply rooted in AI than myself. They, as well as myself, they all say they've never seen technology change at this pace, so rapid of a pace. And the idea that, in 2025 things will be completely different is now very feasible. It's not, it used to be a thing of like, oh well, 5-year cycles, 10-year cycles. With AI it seems like 3-month cycles. So I ask you, 10 years from now, 2034, let's say, what do you like, paint a picture? What does the business community look like? What does the white collar world look like? What do our interactions with that world look like in 10 years, given that hyper speed at which everything in AI is developing?
Well, the foundation for AI is the cloud, right? The advent of the cloud over the last 15 years or so has enabled the advent of AI. More computing, more affordable cloud infrastructure, and all of that. And that cloud infrastructure is growing with requiring more of such infrastructure for AI, basically. So at the end of the day, AI will be used in everything that we do. It could be used on a podcast like this. to do something for you and me during the podcast. Like you talked about Ilya earlier about this company. Maybe AI would automatically pop up on our screen and show what Ilya just said 10 minutes ago, basically, so that you and I can talk about that. So it's going to permeate all processes that we are used to, essentially, by 2034, basically. Now, the value realization from AI is the key question right now that most of the businesses that we work with are trying to figure out. I can apply AI here, I can apply it there, I can apply it there, I can apply it there. But what's the real value I'm going to get out of it? Am I going to save more money? Are things going to get done faster, cheaper, better? That is the question that still people are trying to grapple with, basically. So by 2034, I think not only will people realize how AI can add value, but they're already benefiting from that value, basically. So over the next 10 years, I think, the early adopters, the fast followers, the mainstream adopters, and the laggards would have started to use AI across, whether it's a company, whether it's an end user, whether it's university, and we'll all benefit from it. And the benefit could be not just reduction in cost or whatever, but things getting done faster, basically. The speed of business is where I think the value is going to come from.
And do you think this? I've seen this idea pop up a bunch in Silicon Valley circles, tech chatter. This idea of a one-person $1 billion startup. Do you think that will become common in 10 years? Using AI.
If that was ever true, then there'll be not whatever 5,000 billionaires in the world. There'll be, millions of billionaires in the world, and the value of money will go down. So the point is that if I'm a startup and I need 100 people to do something, basically, can I do the same thing with 20 people? Will AI help me to do that? Yes, basically. But I still need 80 more people to do other things. Not the same things that they're doing today, but to do other things, basically. So it's like anything else, certain things get automated. I mean, if code generation is one of the key benefits of AI. Basically, do I need 50 coders? No, maybe I need 10, basically. But maybe, therefore, if the coding requirement comes down, my design requirement goes up, basically. So because I can put out more products faster, essentially. So the jobs will move around. Now, will companies produce products faster, whether it's a software product or otherwise, and are able to sell them faster, and are able to service them faster? Sure. So I think the speed of business is going to improve thanks to AI being used, basically. It won't take, a company maybe in today's startup world, if you're a successful company, it may take you 5 to 10 years to achieve $100 million in revenue, basically. Maybe that'll come down to 3 years with AI, basically. But then the goals will be different, Well, now I want to get to $1 billion in revenue in 5 to 10 years. So the speed at which things happen will improve, but, I don't think, ultimately a single person can build $1 billion business on his own. At the end of the day, life is still all about, you need to produce a service or a product, you need to sell it, and you need to service it. And not everything can be done by AI, basically. You need people to use the AI to get those functions to work.
Amazing. Okay, that's one of the best answers I've heard to that question, because I think this is the chatter now. This is what everyone's talking about. So I think that's optimistic for humans. That sounds like a good best case scenario for us. Raj, I appreciate you joining us. The website is Kore.ai. That's Kore.ai. If you guys want to check out previous episodes of the 100 Year Podcast, you can go to 100year.com. You can check out our newsletter at 100year.substack.com. We ask that if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It's free. If you're listening, please follow us. Raj, any final words? This has been a great conversation, and I feel like you've given us some of the most pragmatic and kind of like less, I guess, flowery, less sci-fi answers to our AI questions. Any final thoughts?
No, I think, like you said, I'm an optimist, and I think AI, much like the internet, much like wireless communications, is going to make the world a better place. And let's embrace it rather than be worried about it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Raj. I appreciate it. We will see you guys next time.